What's up, family? It's your man, Mark Black. Too often when we discuss justice in America, we find ourselves mostly talking about the lack of justice for black people. So I can imagine when many of us found out about the case of Antonio Marquis Willis's $4 billion bond, our first instinct was to rail against yet another example of the fuckery inherent in the injustice system. However, as I mention often in my videos, we need to ask ourselves the hard questions and never accept at face value anything told to us by the pale stream media. This case is a prime example of this understanding. First, a little background. Mr. Willis is accused of first-degree murder in the December 22, 2016 shooting death of 22-year-old Dante Samuels in Killeen, Texas. After he became aware that he was a suspect in the killing, Mr. Willis turned himself in to authorities. Justice Claudia Brown was elected as the Bell County Justice of the Peace in Precinct 1 in November of the same year. She is the judge that issued the arrest warrant for Mr. Willis and the judge who arraigned him as well. During Mr. Willis's arraignment, Justice Brown set his bond at $4 billion. That's billion with a B. Since then, Mr. Willis's attorney, Billy Ray Hall Jr., filed a bond reduction motion in the 27th District Court, and Mr. Willis's bond was reduced to $150,000. He's been able to meet this bond and is currently released from jail pending his trial. Now that we know a bit of background, I want to discuss something that no one really addresses in the criminal injustice system. I'm going to talk about the bail bonds industry and the practice of using excessive bail as a punishment. In the Eighth Amendment of the Constitution, the language is clear, unlike some other amendments that seemingly are open to interpretation. It says, quote, "Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted," unquote. This is supposedly the highest law of the land, yet we have consistently seen that when it comes to follow-through, the injustice system's cruelty is only exceeded by its illegality. That said, we're going to address the most clear clause in this amendment. Excessive bail and fines are simply those bails and fines that a citizen cannot afford to pay. Of course, this is going to differ from person to person. A multimillionaire can obviously afford to pay larger fines and bonds than a homeless person. Before we go on, we need to examine what is the purpose of bail. Family, in the 1895 Coffin versus United Snakes case, the Supreme Court defined clearly that the presumption of innocence is a foundational principle of American law. The court stated, quote, "The principle that there is a presumption of innocence in favor of the accused is the undoubted law, axiomatic and elementary, and its enforcement lies at the foundation of the administration of our criminal law," unquote. This was only a clarification of something accepted as a clearly well-known basic fact of American criminal justice. Because the burden of proof in any case is always on the person alleging a crime, most often a prosecutor or solicitor, the presumption of innocence means that until there has been a conviction, no one is guilty of anything. The purpose of bail is to ensure that someone accused of a crime participates fully in the criminal justice process. That's all. However, because the presumption of innocence is more principle than actual practice, what we see today is a mockery of justice. People's lives are regularly destroyed by a process that has come to be known as a trial in the court of public opinion, where the mere accusation of a crime is enough to completely malign and decimate the character of the accused. Justice, who is supposed to be blind to all differences between any of us and thus available to us all, magically regains her sight when it's a black face standing before her. Now let us examine this obscene and strange bail order. Until her record-high bail order, the previous record holder was the $3 billion bond ordered in the case of alleged multiple murderer Robert Durst in 2003. Justice Brown, as a newly elected justice, is still in her training period for this position. However, if you think that she was crazy to have set such a high bond, you're right. crazy like a fox. You see, Justice Brown, while probably scaring our brother half to death, has a game plan. This ridiculously high bond has brought some much needed attention to the entire bail bonding system, and this was her plan all along. In a statement given to the Associated Press, Justice Brown says, quote, "I changed the 1 to a 4 and added a whole bunch of zeros. At some point in time, I had to alert the system that I am a new judge and I'm committed to changing the system. And this was the perfect time because this man had come in and turned himself in, and they were starting the bail at $1 million, unquote. You see, unlike all too many of us who find themselves with the power of life and death over our people, Justice Brown is using the power of her position to force a reckoning with the system that has for way too long presented us with a pseudo-justice. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics' 2015 report on the number of jail inmates, there is around 434,000 unconvicted inmates confined in local jails throughout the United States. This means that there are hundreds of thousands of people who have not been convicted of any crime being held in jail. Now, some of these people are very dangerous people, and some are likely to flee if they are released from jail for any reason. However, the vast majority of people are being held on nonviolent charges, and for many of them, they are being held simply because they cannot afford to pay their way out. Of all of the many reasons why Black people need to work toward dismantling this system, the legalized extortion of our people accused of criminal activity is the most important single reason. As noted in the Department of Justice investigation in Ferguson, jurisdictions regularly use law enforcement and the criminal injustice system to fund their operations, using our own resources to continue our oppression. This cannot stand and should be part of our struggle to exact justice from the pale people and the acolytes of whiteism. I want to conclude this video by giving propers where they are due. Here's to you, Justice Brown. While I advocate for our working to ensure that she no longer has a job, at least with the whiteists, this woman's willingness to risk her livelihood, her reputation, and possibly her life by calling attention to one of the most blatant injustices we face in their system is worthy of note and respect. Continue to work for the benefit of the people, sister. We see you. This is your man, Mark Black. Until next time, love, peace, prosperity, and power. Real power to my people.